What I thought I'd do for this video is do something different, and that is to do official guide questions for reading comprehension from GMAT Club. And the advantage there is that we can time ourselves, see the answers instantly, and also I can provide you a link at the end so that you can see the question and you can see the comments afterwards if you like. I haven't seen this question before, so it's going to be a challenge for me just as much as it is for you, and you can try yourself as well. But it's going to give me an opportunity to showcase the strategies that I talk about in my other reading comprehension videos in terms of reading slowly, critical engagement, predicting an answer, things like that. There will be 4 questions that I'm going to answer. We're going to see the answers as I go along, but we're going to review only really at the end. And if you guys like this format of interactive RC content, then please do let me know in the comment section and I'll make more of these videos using GMAT Club. But let's get on to the passage. So how are we going to do this? I guess I will press the timer and then we'll get into reading the passage. Just quickly before I start, a little prediction. For the first question, obviously, because I'm going to be reading slowly and answering the question, it might be something like 5 minutes. And then each question after that might be give or take about a minute or so. And that will add up to the 8 minutes. That both for the GMAT and the GRE, because RC questions come up in both reading comprehension questions, that is approximately the correct amount of time to be taking, 1.5 to 2 minutes per question. Okay, I'm going to start the timer and get into it. When Jamaican-born social activist Marcus Garvey came to the US in 1916, he arrived at precisely the right historical moment. Cool. What made the moment right was the return of African-American soldiers from the First World War in 1918, which created an ideal constituency for someone with Garvey's message of unity, pride, and improved conditions for African-American communities. So this dude had a message of unity, pride, and improved conditions. Cool, and he arrived in 1916. Hoping to participate in the traditional American ethos of individual success, many African-American people entered the armed forces with enthusiasm. Okay, so they wanted to have individual success, and that's why many African-American people entered the armed forces with enthusiasm. Only to find themselves segregated from white troops and subjected to numerous indignities. Awful. They returned to the US that was as segregated as it had been before the war. Okay. Considering similar experiences, anthropologist Wallace has argued that when a perceptible gap arises between a culture's expectations, because they expected individual success, and the reality of that culture, indignities, the resulting tension can inspire a revitalization movement, an organized conscious effort to construct a culture that fulfills long-standing expectations. An organized conscious effort to construct a culture that fulfills, so they wanted the expectations that they had initially that weren't fulfilled so far. Some scholars have argued that Garvey created the consciousness from which he built in the 1920s the largest revitalization movement in African American history. So some scholars think that this Garvey dude who came across in 1916 from Jamaica created the entire consciousness that built the movement. Interesting. He did a lot, it sounds. But such an argument only tends to obscure, cover up, the consciousness of identity, strength, and a sense of history that already existed in the African American community. So they didn't need him to come along and do this. They already had consciousness of identity, strength, and history. They didn't need him. Garvey did not create this consciousness exactly. This is the author's conclusion. Rather, he gave this consciousness its political expression. So he helped out. He definitely helped out. He gave it political expression, but he didn't create it. It was already there. Okay, I think I've mostly understood that passage, I would say. According to the passage, which of the following contributed to Marcus Garvey's success? Let's predict an answer. Basically, the consciousness that was already there, right? African Americans already had that consciousness and he tapped into it. That's my prediction. He didn't introduce it, no, he tapped into it. No, we don't know he believed enthusiastic. It was the soldiers. His audience had already formed a consciousness that made it receptive to his message. Yes. So confident with that. Oh, do I not find out the right answer? Show. C. Yes, correct. So confident with that, I don't even need to check the others. It exactly matched our prediction. And as a bonus, I only spent 3 minutes 26, including answering the question. Obviously, let's start the next timer and we'll get into this question. The passage suggests that many African American people responded to their experiences in the armed forces in which of the following ways? Predict an answer. Well, they were disappointed with the indignities. And what did they do? They did something here, didn't they? The tension inspired a revitalization movement. They made an organized, conscious effort to construct a culture that fulfills the expectations. These expectations they had of individual success that weren't met. That's what they did. So notice I'm not even reading the answers. I'm just forming my own opinion first. Let's double check that. Many African American people responded to their experiences. Yeah, that's what they did. They maintained as civilians their enthusiastic allegiance. Not really. They questioned, no. They joined political organizations to protest the segregation. I didn't hear anything about protest, did you? They became aware of the gap between the expectations. Became aware of the gap between their expectations and the realities. I think that's almost certainly correct. Definitely not repudiated him. I think D's almost certain. If this was the real exam, I'd probably just pick D and move on. Just check they didn't protest. No, I don't think they protest. Therefore, it has to be D, right? I'd be pretty shocked if that's wrong. It's not letting me click it. Show D. Yeah, okay. So far, I'm way ahead on time. That wasn't intentional. I did try to read slowly. Let's take our time on the other ones. It can be inferred from the passage that the scholars mentioned in the highlight text believe which of the following to be true. These dudes thought that it was Garvey who did it himself, right? Some scholars have argued that Garvey created the consciousness from which he built the largest revitalization movement. But then the author says that's ridiculous. Anyway, so these scholars think he created it. Okay, let's see. So they wouldn't believe revitalization resulted from the activism of returning soldiers. They think Garvey did it. Garvey had to change a number of prevailing attitudes in order for his mass movement to find a foothold. Yeah. Created the consciousness, changed attitudes. That's pretty close. Yeah. Prevailing sensibility of the African American community provided the foundation. No, because they're kind of saying that Garvey did it. Okay. Garvey hoped to revitalize consciousness. It's not really that he hoped. They're saying that he did create it. The goal of the mass movement that Marcus Garvey helped to bring... Wait, what? It can be further from the passage that scholars mentioned, believe which the following is true. The goal of the mass movement that he helped to bring into being was to build on the pride and unity. Their argument tends to obscure the consciousness that already existed. Garvey did not create this consciousness, rather he gave it its political... E's kind of tempting. Do they believe that the goal of the mass movement that he helped bring to being was to build on the pride? But I think their emphasis is more on he was responsible for creating consciousness. I don't think they were discussing, these scholars, were the goal. And also, these scholars don't even believe that the African Americans had the unity before he came along. So I think it's B. If I was running out of time on the exam, I'd definitely pick B. If I had loads of time, which I kind of do now, I would check it more. But let's just go for B and see what's... Yeah, B. Cool. Next one. Let's start the timer. According to the passage, many African American people joined the armed forces during the First World War for which of the following reasons? They said it was to join in with the ethos of individual success. And yeah, it was somewhere here. Hoping to participate in the traditional American ethos of individual success. And they were also shocked about being segregated. Anyway, they were doing it for individual success. Let's see. They didn't say anything about economic conditions. Yes, the ideals of personal, individual success attainment. So B, I'm almost certain. Yeah, I probably don't even need to check that. Yeah, B. So that was really fun because it showcased the timing involved, right? You saw how with the first question, obviously you take a lot longer. I took something like 3 minutes, 26 seconds because, and typically I take about 4 to 5 minutes because you're reading the passage slowly, you're engaging critically, you're saying things like, cool, amazing, didn't see that coming. And also, obviously for the first question, you're also answering the question. And then for the other questions, it varied. One of them was something like 2 minutes 43, but others were 43 seconds, as you saw here. But on average, you're looking at ideally more like a minute. I maybe took a bit too much time because question 3 was a bit harder than the others. But I hope this set of questions demonstrates something, because this is from the official guide. These are real questions. It demonstrates that you can take your time when reading the passage and you can enjoy it, right? You can engage with it, have fun with it, and you still have time to answer the questions. The other thing, did you notice as I was going, I always predicted an answer, or more accurately, I formed an opinion before I was swayed by the answers. I stepped back and I said, what do I think? What's my opinion? And then once I've formed my own opinion with evidence and I feel confident, then I look at the answers. If you don't form an opinion, you can get lost in the answers and you can say to yourself, oh yeah, that sounds right. That sounds something accurate. But then you're confused about what the actual question's asking. And did the author phrase this or did scholars phrase this? You get confused. So instead, just pause. What's your opinion? Think for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then you go into the answers. And you can answer things much, much more accurately. So in total, I think I spent about 7 minutes on these 4 questions. Obviously, I explained things a little bit as I was going along, so maybe in the real test, it'll be something like 6.5, which is a bit too quick, but that's fine. Ideally, by the way, in GMAT, you would spend less time on sentence correction to give you more time for reading comprehension. And for the GRE, again, you'd spend less time on text completion, sentence equivalence to give you more time for reading comp. So even this pace was probably way too fast. Either way, if this style of going through GMAT Club questions where you can see the timer and the answers as we go is something that you like, please do leave a like and leave a comment, and I'll do more in the future.